Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is part 2 of my review of the last episode of Star Trek Discovery. And I wanted to make a part 2 to add a few things which I missed in my first viewing of that episode. And I'll start with the little things and then I'll get to the bigger issues. First of all, there was a small continuity mistake between the ending of the previous episode and the beginning of this one. Namely, when Michael went into that portal, she was wearing the Breen outfit, because she was pretending to be a Breen in the previous episode. But when she woke up on the other side of the portal in the last episode, suddenly she was wearing Starfleet gear and not the Breen uniform. This is a relatively easy mistake to explain away, because we can say that outfit was actually made from programmable matter, and so she always had the Starfleet gear underneath and was simply projecting either a hologram or programmable matter stuff to look like a Breen in the previous episode, and maybe as she was going through that wormhole it got disrupted, and that's why she woke up in the Starfleet gear. But it still doesn't make sense why didn't she try to reactivate it when she was on the other side, especially as she was being attacked by other Breen and by Shin Hoti, who were all trying to beat her up. How come she didn't reactivate at least the Breen helmet to protect her face and head from all those attacks, and yet she didn't even try to do that, and so it still feels like a mistake. But at least it can be easily explained away that that ability was simply malfunctioning, and that's why she was unable to reform the Breen armor on her. Now I want to get to the real issue, the progenitor that we saw in this episode. And I'm not talking about the way she looks, even though the makeup is a little bit different from the ones we saw in TNG. The head is a little bit more elongated and not as round as the original progenitor, and her ears are different, they're much more protruding. And her skin color is a little bit different, but that's not really a problem. And actually, the more I think about it, the more I actually like it, because that explains how come all the other humanoid aliens in the galaxy all have exactly the same races as we do on Earth. If the original progenitors had those races and they put their genes into all the humanoids, then that can be used to explain why all the other aliens also have them. So I don't really have an issue with it, that they added some diversity to this progenitor. But there was a specific line that she said that was kind of ridiculous. When she said, and I quote, "Our wish was to create a diversity of beings in the galaxy, a richness of variation." And the more I think about it, the more ridiculous that is, because didn't they do the exact opposite of that? They seeded all the planets with early life with their own DNA, to make the evolution on those planets produce beings such as themselves. So they wanted all the aliens to look like them, instead of whatever they might have looked like if not for that interference. And so isn't that the exact opposite of what this progenitor says in Star Trek Discovery? When she said they wanted to create more diversity and more variation, when they did the exact opposite of that, to lead to humanoids like the originals. And so didn't that cause less diversity and less variations in all the beings in the galaxy? So how does that fit this line? I guess they only wanted to put this line in because this show was always obsessed about diversity of people and all of that, so they just had to put it in here, but it doesn't really fit in the context of what the progenitors actually did, which is to create less diversity, because they forced everyone to look like them. So as always with this show, a lot of things are just upside down of logic. The dialogue doesn't fit what we are shown, or vice versa. It's always the complete reversal of logic, and so it just drives me nuts how this line makes absolutely no sense in the context of it. And if you think about it, what they did, Starfleet wouldn't really approve it, because it goes absolutely against the whole idea of the Prime Directive, when Starfleet always says we should not interfere with other planets and their development, and so the progenitors did the absolute opposite of that. And who is to say if it was even good for the galaxy? Maybe it would have been better off without that interference, because if they turned everyone into humanoids with all the same flaws and the same evil tendencies, you can say maybe that caused all the chaos in the galaxy and all the wars between all the different humanoids, who are all very territorial, they're all very ego-driven, and all these flaws of humanity. So maybe if not for their interference, maybe other beings would be created which would be much more benevolent. Maybe there would not be as many intelligent life forms, maybe most would just turn into all kinds of weird animals, and so they would not become spacefaring, but maybe that would be better for the galaxy. You know, with less intelligent species, maybe there would be less wars between the many different planets, and so maybe it would have been better off for the galaxy. You know, there was a line by that changeling that Odo met in the last season of Deep Space Nine, who was not from the Great Link, who said he lived among different humanoids on many different planets, and he said that he always witnessed that humanoids are bad for their environment. They are always bad for all the other animals, they're always destroying ecosystems, and so he had very low opinion of other humanoids because he saw from his personal experience that humanoids are basically bad for their planets. And so what if, because of what the progenitors did, it actually created more chaos in the galaxy and more evil humanoids everywhere, and so who is to say that was even a good thing they did? And who knows what other beings were prevented from being created naturally because of this artificial interference of forcing everyone to become humanoids. And it just doesn't fit this line when she says they wanted to add diversity. Maybe she's only referring to diversity of cultures, and so she assumes that non-humanoid aliens who would have existed would not have any culture. She assumes that only humanoids are able to have a culture, and that's why they wanted to make everyone into humanoids, to have more cultures in the galaxy. But again, who's to say that's a good thing? And how can you know what other cultures could have formed if not for you forcing everyone to become like you? And so what you did is create less diversity in the galaxy, the absolute opposite of this line. And another thing that drives me nuts is that no one bothered to ask this progenitor how exactly did they go extinct, because she says that they all died by now, and the one from TNG also said that they knew they're all going to disappear someday. So how did they know that, and how did they disappear? How did they go extinct exactly? Wouldn't that be a very important information, because maybe it can help save us from a similar fate? Wouldn't you want to know how exactly such a powerful species, who didn't seem to have any enemies in the galaxy since they were alone in the galaxy, so how exactly did they go extinct? What exactly caused it? Wouldn't that be a very important question to ask her? And yet Michael never seems to care about that. She's not curious about that. And it's not just a matter of curiosity, it's simply a very important technical question. It's a very important bit of information to know, because that might help save us as well from a similar fate. So I think it's very important to ask, how exactly did they go extinct, what exactly caused it, and how can we avoid a similar fate? And yet no one seems to bother to ask the progenitor, who they can physically talk with now, unlike the recording from TNG, who you cannot talk back to, you cannot ask her questions, it's just a recording. But here you can talk with the progenitor in a live transmission apparently. They didn't properly explain how exactly it's possible. She said something about being in some separate pocket of space-time that her consciousness exists in, so it doesn't really matter. The point is that was an opportunity to ask her some more important questions about what exactly happened with them. Did they all turn into salamandras or what? Because, you know, in Voyager they imply that's where the human evolution is leading to. So it would be a very important question to ask. And yet no one seems to care about that. And also they lose the opportunity to do that later, because they decide, Michael decides, to throw this whole place down a black hole and lose that connection with that progenitor. That progenitor will now not be accessible anymore, so you will not be able to ask any more questions. So shouldn't you at least first ask her all these questions before you decide to throw her into a black hole and make her be gone forever? Why not at first at least question her about these very important questions about the history of the universe and what happened with them and what other dangers there might be in the universe? Who exactly caused their extinction? Was it a civil war? Was it some other aliens from outside the galaxy? I think it's very important questions that no one seems to care to ask. And they also closed the opportunity to ask it later because they decided to get rid of her in the black hole. They just throw the whole place into a black hole. And also, how did they know that by throwing that place into a black hole it will not cause a disaster? Meaning that place had all those gateways connected with countless planets in the galaxy, especially all the planets with life. You know, that's how they seeded all the planets in the galaxy, by using those gateways. And we also saw that those gateways are apparently open on both ends all the time, which doesn't really make sense, because wouldn't people on those planets notice that hole in the sky, and wouldn't they try to get into that place? I guess maybe it was made in a way that only people from that place will be able to go to those planets and back, and maybe people on those planets wouldn't see those gates in the sky. But they do seem to be open and connected with all those planets all the time. So what exactly would happen if you throw that place into a black hole? Isn't it dangerous that the black hole might start sucking up all those other planets through those gateways. You know, it reminds me of that episode from Stargate SG-1 when they dialed to a planet that was falling into a black hole, and then they saw the team that they sent to that planet moving in slow motion and unable to get back through the gate because time itself was moving much more slowly near that black hole, and so they were basically stuck there, and then Stargate Command was not able to shut the gate off. And then they noticed that the gate was actually pulling things toward it, meaning the gravity from the black hole was actually seeping through the gate and also causing the same time dilation effect, meaning the closer you get to the gate, the slower time moves. And so what if the same problem happens now? Because they decided to throw that whole place with all those portals into a black hole. Wouldn't it start sucking up all those planets into the black hole through those gateways? And so every single planet connected to that place will have a small black hole appear on it and start sucking up the whole planet into it, sucking up all the planets with life. So how did they know it's not going to happen? And so that's probably the most ridiculous part of the episode. And then Kovic also decides to classify all of it. You know, I asked this question in the first episode of this last season when Kovic was telling Michael about the progenitors. She didn't seem to know anything about them until he told it to her. And I asked it back then, was their existence classified and why? Why should it be classified? Wouldn't their existence just make all the aliens more friendly toward each other, as we saw in the end of that episode of TNG, that even the Romulan started getting more friendly with Picard, saying that, you know, they are much more similar than they thought, in the other life they might be best friends, and all that kind of dialogue. And so why would anyone hide the knowledge of those progenitors from the rest of the galaxy when it will actually help bring people together, knowing they're all relatives basically? So why exactly should it be classified? And so it was kind of vague in the dialogue. Maybe Michael didn't know about it because she's from the past, from before TNG, and so I could explain it away that way, that she just didn't read up on it yet. But in this last episode, they basically confirmed that it was indeed classified, because once again he says it will all be classified. No one will know about what just happened. No one will know about all this technology with the gateways and all of that. And I keep thinking, why? Why would you classify it? Especially when it was the dying wish of those progenitors to be remembered. That was in the dialogue in TNG, when the progenitor specifically said that they want to be remembered. Her very last line is, "Remember us." So obviously they wanted their descendants to know about them, and yet Starfleet apparently classified all of it, and so that also makes no sense. I guess it's to prevent anyone from coming back in time and stealing this technology before it's thrown into the black hole, and that's why it has to be classified, to prevent anyone from ever knowing about it. But you know, they said that time travel is banned in the entire galaxy now, that no one will ever use time travel again. There's a galactic treaty to prevent it, and so if that's the case and there is no more temporal wars and no more time travelers, then why should you classify it exactly? And also, since when is an event horizon of a black hole such a big problem? Because wasn't there an episode of Voyager when Voyager was stuck in a black hole and was able to get out? I guess technically they never said it was a black hole. They said something about the singularity that they got stuck in. But I do specifically remember they said they're punching a hole through the event horizon to get out of it. So, and I know Voyager had some pretty terrible technobabble overall. That's one of the reasons I kind of disliked that show, because it was always annoying to me how they're using scientific terms incorrectly. So anyway, I remember they were able to make a hole through the event horizon and get out of that singularity. And so if this kind of technology is possible in even 24th century starships, how come in the 32nd century they're still unable to get through a black hole's event horizon? I mean, they are able to move faster than light, obviously, so why is it such a big problem that they say it's like gone forever in the black hole? It doesn't really make sense in the context of Star Trek. And even earlier in this season, they said that they have special shields that prevent the effects of relativity, meaning all the time dilation effect I mentioned wouldn't really affect the starship, apparently. They kind of confirmed it somewhere in the season. So why is the event horizon of a black hole such a big deal for them is not really that clear. And also Starfleet's technology in general seems to be much less advanced than it should be in this time period, because in the old shows, whenever we saw anyone from centuries in the future, the technology seemed to be way more advanced than what we see now. You know, Michael is so amazed to see all these gateways, but shouldn't the Federation have gateways like that in this time? I mean, even back in Deep Space Nine time, people had long-range transporters that could teleport people over light years. Technically, it wasn't Starfleet transporters, but the Dominion had them, and a bunch of other races also. Even the Ferengi Bok had such a transporter that could teleport people over light years. And so how come centuries later Starfleet don't yet have that technology as well, which existed even back in the 24th century? And they say that Kovich is actually Daniels, but Daniels had all kinds of amazing technology which seem to disappear now. So he had that device that enabled him to walk through walls, for example. He had time portals that could not only teleport him in time, but also all over the galaxy apparently, because he could always show up wherever the Enterprise was. And another small issue I want to elaborate on, which I did mention in the previous part, when Daniels said that he's from the USS Enterprise, I said it makes no sense because Archer's Enterprise was not USS, and I assumed what they were going with is that maybe Daniels was originally an actual crew member of the NX-01 Enterprise, as Archer thought. Maybe at some point he got recruited by the temporal agents and became one of them and then came back to his original ship. That's what I thought they were going with, but a lot of people in the comments seem to think that Daniels originated from the Enterprise J. And I assume it's because of that scene in Season 3 of Enterprise when Daniels took Archer to the 26th century to the Enterprise J. And so a lot of people probably misremember that scene, and so they assume that must be Daniels' future on the Enterprise J. And I guess the writers of this episode also thought that. But that's not actually the case, because Daniels was from the 31st century, and he never said that he was from the Enterprise. He simply pulled Archer to that ship to show him the battle against the Sphere Builders, and the Xindi were on that ship, and he wanted to show him all those things on that ship, but he never said that he was from the Enterprise J. He simply wanted to show Archer that battle from the window. And Daniels actually came from centuries later, and he also seemed to be operating from Earth, because in the end of Season 1 of Enterprise, when he pulled him into the future and it accidentally ruined the future and caused Earth to become a wasteland, Daniels was there on Earth, and he said, I just had breakfast in that building, and then everything was destroyed, including my time portals were all gone now, because of the change in the timeline. So that seems to indicate that he was operating from Earth itself and not from any starship. And so there was never any indication that he originated from any Enterprise. And when he tells Michael that he's from the Enterprise, why wouldn't he say which letter? Otherwise it will be confusing for Michael. If he doesn't say which letter, then she might think he's from her brother's ship, from Spock's Enterprise, because he doesn't add any letter. And so I guess he might mean an Enterprise in the 31st century, but we never heard anything about it until now. He was operating from Earth, as I said, and not from any starship. And so I think this line was created because the writers misremember that scene of him taking Archer to the future Enterprise J, and so they assumed he must be from the Enterprise J. But that was in the 26th century, and he only showed him that to show him that battle against the Sphere Builders, which the Federation won, and that's it. He never said he was from that ship. And so a lot of people in my comments also seem to have mistook that. I'm not blaming any of you. It's okay, you don't remember exactly a show you saw 20 years ago, but the writers of this episode should have gone and checked before they wrote that. And so that's what's annoying. I'm not blaming the fans who might misremember things, but the creators of this show, who for some reason decided to tie it all together. Why not do some basic research and at least watch all the scenes with Daniels carefully in the context and not just misremembering things that they saw years ago? And so that's why it's so annoying. I guess I can explain that there was another Enterprise in the future, but how come he never said which letter? Isn't that just adding confusion? Why doesn't Michael ask, wait, you mean my brother's ship? Or if he actually means Archer's Enterprise, that also wouldn't make any sense, not just because it was never referred to as a USS, it was always NX-01, and I'm pretty sure it was put into a museum just when the Federation was created, otherwise it will create a whole bunch of other continuity issues, like Scotty talking with the Enterprise D computer to show him the Enterprise on the holodeck. The computer never offered to show him the NX-01, presumably because it's not a Federation Enterprise, and so that's why we cannot have the NX-01 as a Federation ship. And also, if Daniels originated on the ship, if he was an actual crew member when he started out from that ship, then how come he doesn't suffer any health issues because of his trip to the distant future? Because, in the previous season, in Season 3, he said that time travel is actually bad for your health when he was explaining why George was having all those issues, because she jumped not just between universes, but also centuries into the future. And so How come he doesn't suffer any health issues if he's Daniels? Didn't Daniels do a whole bunch of time jumps? And so how come he doesn't have any health issues? And also technically we saw in old Daniels when he was all messed up from the temporal war and he didn't really look like Kovic. You know, if they actually got that same actor back and showed like a flashback scene taking place somewhere in the middle between these two characters to help explain things, then maybe I could have accepted it. And the most interesting missed opportunity was that they never explained Future Guy, you know, that evil time traveler guy who was said to be from an earlier century. They should have said maybe that was an evil variant of Daniels from some other timeline or something. So they could have showed like a quick montage, a quick explanation that could have been interesting, but they don't bother to. This show is really lazy, so they're kind of artificially tying all of this together, but it's not really making sense and it's not really adding anything, so it was totally pointless and a missed opportunity because it could have been interesting. If they really wanted to delve into this issue, it could have been a really interesting story to show what exactly happened with Daniels and all of that. But the way they tie things together just feels really lazy. And also we all know that Daniels actually originated from the USS Protector from Galaxy Quest. That's where he's really from. And also they imply that he stole Picard's wine and Geordi's visor and Sisko's baseball. And so did he visit Deep Space Nine and the Enterprise D? Did he steal all their things to take them to the future? And so does he still practice time travel in secret? Because, you know, in the end of this episode, Admiral Michael takes the Discovery to wait somewhere for 1,000 years and they disguise the ship to look like the old version of itself and then tells Zora that she's going to meet someone named Kraft in the future, 1,000 years from now. So how the hell can they know that unless they're secretly still doing time travel? So even though there's a galactic treaty banning all forms of time travel, but Starfleet secretly still practices it, that's the impression I seem to get from all of it, because they hid the identity of Daniels as this other guy, not wanting anyone to know that he's actually a time traveler, and then he's sending the Discovery on a new Red Directive mission and disguising it as if it's from the past, and then it has to wait for a guy that he somehow knows will be there in the future and they have to help him out for some reason. So how can he know all those things? And why did he want to classify the progenitor technology unless he knew that some other people from the future might come back to try to steal it, and that's why he has to classify it. So that seems to indicate that he knows there is still some time traveling going on from the distant future maybe, otherwise he wouldn't do that. And you know what would have been really funny? If the progenitor in this episode would have been played by Jeffrey Combs. That would be hilarious because he played so many different aliens in Star Trek. And so seeing one of the progenitors look exactly like him would be hilarious because it would kind of explain it. And that's probably an edit I'm going to make. I'm working on so many different parody edits. It's going to take me a while, but eventually I'll do that as well. So check it out on my other channel. Let me know what you think and we can discuss it in the comments below. And I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.